Okay, so let's start talking about day 6 in the Jonathan Majors trial. If you didn't see my videos from yesterday or see me on X, my filter is off. I got into this case trying to look at consistencies in the reporting, and as it went on, it seemed like, except for what Insider was doing to cover what Priya Chaudhry was providing to the public, there was a slant everywhere else. And yesterday, as soon as the afternoon session of Grace Jabbari's testimony kicked off, I think Danny put it in great words. Seems like she did a 180 on the stand, and it seems like the very people I've been relying on for reporting in the courtroom did a 180. At least they didn't quickly go out and get these details that, in my opinion, look really great for Jonathan Majors' case, look really bad for Grace Jabbari's credibility. And that was on direct. Direct was questioning by the prosecution, ADA Kelly Galloway, and there were still very damning things said. So if you did not see that, check out the second video of day 5 that I have posted in my video section. Round that up. It's like 11 minutes, really quick, and then come back to this video because it's important stuff. It goes through all of the videos, the surveillance footage. If you just want the too long didn't watch, Grace Jabbari chased this man for over 5 city blocks, and this is on surveillance footage. She admits to starting the physical part of the altercation. And then she continues to say that she kept chasing him and was mad and whatever else because she just wanted to know who the woman was in the phone, Cleopatra. So it seems like she thinks she's justified in that behavior, and I think it's really problematic that she's probably not the only person in the world that thinks it's okay to grab somebody, to take their object from them, try to keep it from them, chase them for, I don't know how long it lasted. She stopped her testimony yesterday. Testimony ended with her entering the apartment, the penthouse apartment building. This morning, we've already gotten testimony on what happened when the police arrived and when she went to the hospital. We're going to go over that recap in this video. Before we start, I tried to be fair and I tried to go look at these news outlets that I said were being radio silent yesterday to see if anyone after time had passed. They've been publishing very quickly, almost within an hour of, the reporter being able to tweet something. The articles are going out. But for the most part yesterday, I still see everyone focusing on the morning's testimony or only the bits and pieces of the afternoon testimony where Grace said something like, "Oh, I was hit on the head." Besides the Daily Mail, who did cover a lot of the things that Danny Does Law mentioned, so shout out to them. I'm surprised that it was Daily Mail of all people doing the coverage, but they did it. ABC has not. Vulture has some conflicting information compared to what other reporters have said, even about the morning testimony. It just all seems so selective that call them out. Like, let's call them out. I'm ready for it. Well, thank you, Sharon Gardner. So let's start with Vulture, who is getting a lot of their information and their writing on this case from Victoria B. This morning, she said, here's our recap of Grace Jabbari's first day of testimony. So pulling up that article to do my due diligence here before I continue to keep saying there's media silence on what I think are damning parts of Grace Jabbari's testimony yesterday. So I pull up this article. It's been updated at some point yesterday. The headline is still focusing on that monster bit. Opens with the description of Grace Jabbari repeatedly crying. He said that he was a monster, that he wanted to kill himself and had actions in place to do so. She said the guilt was her deterrent from leaving the controlling relationship. He'd scare me when he'd say things like, it's in place, it's in motion. Well, you know what? I'm going to stop and say that in context that she's providing, maybe that does sound really scary if she's saying that that obviously means some type of threat. But it's in place, it's in motion. We also heard yesterday from Danny that his manager, Priya S., not Priya Chaudhry, but his manager, also managed certain affairs for Grace Jabbari. So if there's text messages that say it's in place, it's in motion, and nothing else to indicate that it conclusively means he's threatening something to control her, it's in place, it's in motion could sound like he relayed something to Priya S. to handle business, maybe booking a flight or booking a room or booking a car on behalf of either just Jabbari herself or maybe the both of them. So I don't know how meaningful pulling a quote like this is supposed to be, even if she has some text message somewhere that says that. We do have it noted here that she spoke matter-of-factly and did not shed any tears. Majors was looking at her, kept his eyebrow raised, as if trying to make a visual show of skepticism. Well, maybe he was actually skeptical. She goes over the brunch recap, the buttons, how she talked to Priya S., the monster quote, and that she walked him down as she often did. So she's the savior here. Or maybe she actually did, you know. But then seeing the text messages, and then this is how the actual event at the center of the charges. Went to grab his phone, she turned away with his phone, and felt a heavy weight on top of her. He was trying to pry the phone out of the hand, and then when that wasn't successful, he put my hand behind my back. It just felt like he was kind of twisting my arm in my hand and trying to make me feel pain. It just felt excruciating. Next, I felt a pretty hard blow across my head. She said she sat back, Majors took the phone back, he ordered the driver to pull over, and when he got out, Jabbari tried to exit as well. I was in pain, but I was just thinking, who is this girl? Vicky lets us know that jurors saw the video of Majors picking up Jabbari when she tries to get out of the SUV and trying to put her back inside. So, you know what? I appreciate that because this is not being described as throwing like a football or repeatedly hitting the vehicle. The video then appears to show Majors taking Jabbari by the hand across the street. He then takes off on foot and she chases after him. He was my boyfriend. That morning we were talking about how we're going to get married and the names of our children. So this is actually pretty consistent with some of the details that Danny described for us. And then it goes back to the timeline, the beginning of the story, the relationship, the pattern of abuse. Now, what do you think of that? Because I'm actually surprised this is more than we've seen so far. However, it seems to leave out any emphasis on the extent of the chase, which I think is completely critical. And don't forget, we also got into some testimony about, when she met the three strangers on the sidewalk and what happened after that. We had Jabbari admit that she ripped the buttons and she was hitting Jonathan Majors, but we don't see that quoted here. Maybe I missed it, but I don't see that quoted here. And I think that's very selective to leave out as details because I can't imagine sitting in a courtroom and not hearing at least one of those details be said. And you might have seen me call this out this morning, but when Emily Palmer started her coverage today, she linked to People's article on the first day of testimony. And when I opened it, this is how the fight was characterized. The fight, she said, became physical, and trying to get him off of her, she told the jury she pushed back. Now, you can go read that article in full, but we know that Grace Jabbari said herself how it became physical. She took the phone. She fought to keep the phone. And this is completely characterizing it as if, out of nowhere, it suddenly got physical, and she was just protecting herself. And I think that was a very slick wording. I'm disappointed by it. So let's get into the morning half of day 6. So Emily Palmer already has an article published at 11:52 a.m. That's around the same time. I think she was done on Direct. I think Direct had finished right at this time, so I'm not sure if it's a complete update. But it leads with the headline, Jabbari testifies that Majors knows what he's done, in a quote. He knows what he's done. He's cheated on me. He's attacked me, Jabbari told the jury Wednesday morning. Jabbari told the jury that after their alleged fight, in which she says Majors twisted her arm, fractured her finger, and slapped her hard across the face. Thank you, Ryan. After she discovered his alleged infidelity, she reached out to him wanting closure. Well, I mean, we saw those text messages of you reaching out to him, and you were insisting that you told them he didn't strangle you, that's absolutely not what happened, that you loved him, that you wanted him to answer you. That's not really closure. That seems like you want a continuance. You want another chance. You want it to keep going. And we're going to circle back to that because she testifies about what she told the officer and what she told the staff at the hospital about how she was trying to escape the relationship. She continued that story today on the stand that does not seem to match what she was doing on that day. I think I'd made a really clear determination in my mind that this was not a good relationship. And I don't ever want to see him again, but we're adults, we should talk this through. That was her state of mind at the time. I just thought, I'm getting out of here, overwhelmed by the idea of packing up from the penthouse she had just moved into, and feeling pain and really drained. Jabbari said she fell asleep. But first, she said she locked their bedroom door because I know the defendant. In order to feel safe, I needed everything locked. So did the prosecution not talk about, there's no note, I just wanted you to know? Jabbari said she woke up on the floor surrounded by emergency personnel who had been called by Majors who could not get inside. She recalled them asking her what happened and how she was afraid to say too much because Majors was in the next room. I alluded to it in the safest way I felt possible, she said, adding through tears. I just wanted to say, and remember, we're not getting audio of that 46 seconds of the body cam footage where the police are talking to Grace Jabbari in the closet where she was passed out. I wanted to say, help me please. Jabbari, who is white, said she had not reported past incidents of violence. because she knew Majors to be not trusting of police as a black man, and I didn't want to put him in that position. But this time, emergency personnel took photos of her injuries and admitted her to the hospital because they believed I wanted to hurt myself. I loved him still. It was so confusing, and I didn't want to get him in trouble. That's why she didn't describe the alleged attack to law enforcement at first. But you said you wanted to tell. You just said you wanted to tell them, but were too scared to tell them. But now you're saying you were confused. And I get that either could be an explanation, right? Either of those could be, potentially, a viable explanation. But they don't really, they conflict together. So you knew you wanted to tell, but then you also were confused and didn't want to tell. Describing how she learned of Major's arrest while she was at the hospital getting a splint put on her finger, I just felt really sad. I felt like it was my fault. I felt like I should have just lied so he wouldn't get in trouble. Well, you know, in your complaint, you didn't mention that you chased him for 5 blocks. You didn't mention any of that. I don't think you mentioned that you hit him. I don't think you mentioned that you ripped his coat button. I don't think you mentioned that you started the physical altercation. At least the police officers didn't report that, and it wasn't in the amended complaint that you gave the language to correct. I'm not sure where you're saying that you felt like you should have just lied so he wouldn't get in trouble, because it seems like the only place where you're saying this didn't happen was in your text messages to him, not to your statements to the police, not in your correction to the prosecution that interviewed you. The place where you came out and said, oh, it absolutely isn't true, was in text messages to him after he'd already been arrested, too. You maintained this whole, I love you, please answer me. After he'd already been arrested. He was arrested while you were still in that building, the penthouse. So it's not like you thought he would be in the house when you went back there with your friends after leaving the hospital. So why are you saying you felt like you should have just lied so he wouldn't get in trouble, but continued on and then changed your story when things didn't add up? I have questions. And then so there is some recap here, but she grabbed his phone, the weight of him on top of me, trying to pry the phone from my fingers, the twisting of the arm. She curled her body just trying to protect herself, and then felt the blow against her head. And no reporting of him chasing her, no reporting of him, no reporting of her chasing him, no reporting of her saying she was hitting him back, no reporting of her saying she knows she started the physical fight. Hey 40, thanks for subscribing. Just a very clean interpretation, a very favorable interpretation of that testimony, favorable to Grace Jabbari. So let's hop over and piece together some of the reporting from what happened this morning, besides what we just saw from that People article, because I'm not sure that People is going to give us all the details. They don't seem to be. And this is actually at 5 p.m. Eastern, by the way. Danny Does Law is going to be joining Dr. Hines, not a real doctor. It's an inside joke that's not very inside. If you want to see what Danny has to say today, she will be live with Dr. Hines. I've reshared this link on my Twitter. It's going to be at 5 p.m. Eastern time. If that time approaches, just jump to my Twitter to get an easy link to this. I'll also throw it in the description of this video if I publish it in time. But let's look at Josh Russell's reporting on the morning so far. Let's go through it. Jabbari's direct testimony Wednesday morning is mostly focused on the end of the night of March 25th and the morning after, detailing the pain of the injuries and police first responders' arrival and Majors' arrest. At 12:02, prosecutors finished direct questioning. Following a short break, defense attorney Priya Chaudhry will handle Yes, Priya is doing the cross-examination. Setting the scene for Jabbari's cross-examination, Majors defense attorney Priya is wearing a hot pink kimono-style drapey robe and shiny silver flats. I can picture that. Right away, you know there's videos of you dancing at Lucy's, Chaudhry asks. You know those were not played, correct? Because remember, they only played the video of the credit card being signed. And that's where Grace Jabbari came and said, well, yeah, I could still do things even though I was injured. I'm a dancer. I've danced in pointed shoes my whole life and danced with broken ribs. They only showed that footage of her at the reception desk signing the check or whatever she was doing. They did not show the dancing clips or the shots at the bar or any of that. Sorry, shout out to Danny. Gotta make the word known because the reporter's being shouted out here. I didn't know Eliza Merrill was in the courtroom, so I'll have to see her coverage, but I don't see any on her timeline yet. I like her reporting a lot, but I don't really see Danny being mentioned here, so shout out to Danny if you guys want to go over there and shout Danny out. So get out there and get the coverage known. Okay, so I don't see Molly covering it live. I don't see Kyle currently covering anything, but it looks like he'll do like closing recaps and do some writing for the New York Post. We might look at that later. Nothing live from Ben today, but right now we're working with what Victoria's reporting on. Good morning from 100 Center Street. The Jonathan Majors trial continues. Grace Jabbari's direct testimony will continue this morning. Court officers are giving Stanford prison experiment vibes today. They're doing something with removing seats, letting them know the rules of saving seats. Jonathan Majors enters court. This is yesterday. This is an old picture too. We're now getting to the aftermath of the incident. Jabbari is describing returning home to their Chelsea apartment. She took off shoes, coat, grabbed water, went to bed. She was asked about pain level. Jabbari, again noting her background as a dancer who suffered and danced through injuries, described knowing something was wrong but not fully registering. Again, it was kind of like this full-bodied experience of shock. Now, Danny told us that she kept saying she didn't feel any pain. The prosecutor kept asking if she felt pain. This was yesterday afternoon. And she kept saying, I was just in shock, or there was adrenaline, even though the prosecution kept asking, was there pain? Of her finger, she said, it had changed color slightly. It was kind of red. I was really aware that something was not right. I don't know. I can't imagine it. I mean, maybe she was drunk enough where she didn't feel it. I keep thinking about how that the jury foreperson is a registered nurse. Jabbari is now describing phone-based interaction with Jonathan Majors after the alleged incident. That's probably the text. They texted and spoke on the phone. He was kind of saying that he didn't do anything, that he loved me. Jabbari said she insisted he come over and explain himself. He didn't. Jabbari testified that she decided to sleep. Okay, so this is describing not after the hospital or after the arrest, but this must be describing after 1 a.m. at some point before she passed out in the closet. She said that they spoke on the phone, that he loved me. She insisted he come over and explain himself. But yesterday you testified that you didn't want to go to that apartment. You reiterated today that you were, like, scared and loathed the idea of packing, but that you had said that you were getting out of this relationship. So this seems really inconsistent, let alone that you called him 32 times or whatever, but you told the jury that you just wanted closure. This sounds messy. Anyway, Jabbari testified that she decided to sleep. Due to the pain I was in my body, I realized I couldn't lie on my right side at all. I just felt hideous. So remember I said, like, insecurity can be a real feeling and that can translate. She's highlighting that she felt hideous. Often when I can't sleep, I take a sleeping tablet or two. But do you spill them? Do you leave them spilled? She said she took 2 that night and noted they were over the counter. And that she took 2, it chips away at an implication that Jabbari was throwing back Xanax or Ambien. Well, it could chip away at that implication. Or it could be determined that her recall is not credible, or that how she's representing something that she may recall is also not credible. So it doesn't chip away at the implication, it could chip away. In these words, it chips away at an implication that Jabbari was throwing back Xanax or Ambien after a night of drinking. To be clear, this isn't criticism of persons who take medications, but we all know mental health, and then, yeah, it is stigmatized. And how easy it is to make an accuser seem unreliable or crazy if they take any kind of medication ever. Well, hold on. But what's the flip side of this? Completely reliable and stable people can often do unreasonable things because of substances. So there shouldn't be this blanket stigmatization of over-the-counter medications. But there also shouldn't be a blanket brush off as if it's not significant. There shouldn't just be this, oh, don't pay attention to what a substance could do to alter somebody, especially if she was drinking earlier in the night. So, and remember, we heard her admit that she was drinking or whatever, but I don't think the prosecution went through a detailed count of the amount that she drank from the dinner on the 24th through her in the club on the 25th. So this isn't just some, often I take a sleeping tablet or 2, and this was an ordinary day. But I get it, and yes, this is the prosecution trying to preempt any implication that's going to come up from Priya Chaudhry. Especially now that we know that Priya Chaudhry is, in fact, unsurprisingly, leading cross-examination on Grace Jabbari. We know this will come up. As well as any suggestion that could come from the defense that she was self-destructive, taking pills after drinking, etc. Well, remember the only incident that we heard about yesterday to establish this pattern of long-standing abuse, alcohol was kind of a common denominator in them. Not the dog story, but the Glastonbury and coming home with the friends from the pub. Jabbari describes the alleged laceration on her head. As Jabbari struggled to sleep due to pain, she testified, I noticed that the hair on my head was like stuck behind my ear. Was like, what is going on? I had no idea. I started realizing I could like peel my hair off. My head feeling like it was dried blood, I guess. I was just like, ugh, what is this? She also said, my finger had, at that point, turned more or less black. So this is while she's in the apartment, and supposedly he had texted her friend a picture of this and said she'd gotten really scrappy that night. So, but if you're having no idea, and this is before you've passed out and then woken up, if you're already saying what is going on, you had no idea, like your recall's already not all there for whatever reason, but your recall's not all there, and that's important no matter what the reason is. Going to skip ahead since this is quick moving. Well, maybe we heard something interesting there, who knows. Jabbari said she decided to leave. Exhausted by the events and prospect of packing up her life ASAP, she took a rest on the heated bathroom floor. She woke to a group of officers feeling really overwhelmed. So she was on the bathroom floor? Jabbari, who said she'd gone to sleep in a jumper, said, it was so overwhelming, being a woman half naked, like surrounded by big men. It was not the nicest feeling I've ever experienced in my life. Meanwhile, she heard Majors in the next room. I know I alluded to it in the safest way I felt possible. What do you mean, prosecutor asked. I could hear Jonathan in the next room, so I didn't exactly want to say what happened, but I also saw this as a moment to have a bit of help in leaving the relationship. I wanted to say, scroll. I wanted to say, help me please. At this point, Jabbari broke into tears, dabbed her eyes, and put face into her hands. She didn't realize this could be help from a cop. I was just really scared, but I just desperately needed help to someone just to get me out, still. Now I want to pause there because she was apparently like straight-faced and focused the whole time she was testifying about the actual alleged incident, where she insisted she never cut or scratched Majors, but that she felt his weight and all of that. But we have her crying when she talks about these ideas of leaving, even if she's characterizing it as her needing to get out to escape the abuse. We also saw the tears when she described, him running away from her. We just see this idea of tears and sadness come out at moments where she pictures being alone. Whether she's stating that reason for being alone is her choice or someone else's choice, that seems to be when we're seeing her get teary-eyed. Not when she talks about actual moments of abuse or the abuse itself, the alleged abuse, but when whatever happened has an end result of possible separation. And then we see the quote here about trusting police that we saw earlier. Again, gonna fast forward, there's a lot. Jabbari was taken to the hospital. She underwent a variety of medical assessments. She was apprised that Majors had been arrested. I just felt really sad, like it was my fault. Like I should have just lied and said nothing. Regarding her hospitalization, they were told that I'd done something to myself. So I went in and met with someone and just told them it was a situation with my boyfriend and that he had hurt me and that I hadn't done anything to myself. I wonder if this is between the text messages where there's like the couple hours break between her messages. And then we have the closing note from Danny about direct. Jabbari tearfully testified that the situation has impacted her life very negatively, with a lot of unwanted attention over a really difficult time of my life. Public scrutiny and opinion since March 25th, feels as if the abuse that she was in never ended. And then let's get into Cross. So right now, Danny is characterizing Cross as Jabbari appearing frazzled, confused, and conveniently forgetful. Claims she didn't remember what time they left for the play at BAM, when she had stated earlier it was around 6:30 p.m. during direct examination. And then let's look at Victoria's threads because that's where we're getting live updates right now. Defense attorney Priya Chaudhry starts off by asking Grace Jabbari how many times she met and spoke with prosecutors and whether they went over what they would ask her. You didn't tell them during your trial prep sessions what your answers would be? Jabbari had asked for clarification on several of Chaudhry's questions several times. The judge has told Chaudhry that some of her questions were confusing and to focus the questions, that some queries were too broad. The whole gist of this line of questioning, which in terms of efficacy remains to be decided, is to imply that prosecutors carefully shaped Jabbari's answers, etc., etc. They did tell you were going to be cross-examined. Did they tell you not to answer any questions yes or no? Jabbari said no. Chaudhry shoots back, so it's your choice not to answer, yes or no. She's now being asked about whether she had a folder or a photo album of pics of Majors. Chaudhry asks about background. Did Jabbari know that he got a master's from Yale Acting School? Chaudhry then invokes Jesus. You know that Mr. Majors is Christian, correct? You prayed with Mr. Majors, correct? You know that Mr. Majors travels with the Bible, correct? Chaudhry's asking Jabbari about her drinking, whether it was a source of tension in her relationship with Majors. Asks about a situation in Sag Harbor. Did you and Majors have a discussion that caused you to leave and go to the beach with a bottle of wine? And this is 12:32 p.m. Well, okay. I'm not taking sides here. But I'm honestly curious whether the jury is going to judge Jabbari for the apparent argument wine beach progression. If jurors reflect greater population, probably a decent amount have had a drink or drinks post-argument. Yeah, but have the greater portion of people felt like it was okay to chase someone for 5 New York City blocks post-argument and then go and tell people they were scared and felt trapped during that 5-block chase? And the issue isn't someone drinking after an argument. I would imagine the significance here is anytime there's a discussion about the relationship, Jabbari puts her headphones in. She doesn't want to hear it. It's possible she characterizes any discussion that her partner tries to have with her as a personal attack rather than listening to it and, evaluating the relationship for what it is. When you get upset about things, it's hard to communicate. And if your response to that is to go and drink and wait for it to be over, the relationship can't progress because the communication is just delayed until the next time that this happens, and it ends up in the same result where you go and drink after an argument, which I'm assuming Priya Chaudhry is going to allude to. Her going out with friends wasn't to celebrate the end of their relationship because she was still texting him trying to make sure the relationship would be preserved. She was still asking him to respond to her, trying to say, I love you, waiting for an I love you back, it seems like, in those text messages. So this isn't just someone drinking after an argument to decompress. The significance of this would be you framed this entire relationship as something where you were always coming to save things. You always had to be the savior, and you had to deal with his self-hate. And he had any communications he had about their relationship and his standards and his wants were demanding and controlling. But if he was just trying to have communications as an ordinary course of a relationship, and there's a pattern where you leave to go drink with friends, or you put your headphones in, and you don't want to hear it, you're not really being controlled. You're not really being made to change. And you shouldn't be shocked when someone says they don't want to be with you anymore, especially if there's a catalyst of you starting a physical altercation with them that prompts them to finally break up with you. So I hope that the jurors reflect a greater population of common sense where they don't just think, hey, because I know it's reasonable and not surprising that someone may drink to decompress after an argument with somebody, they can also sit there and say, well, if there's a pattern of this happening consistently, I can also see how that would not be a good relationship, and one of the parties might want to break up with somebody because the relationship isn't progressing forward. So that's my thought. But we do have an article from Pilar Melendez. This is for the Daily Beast. We've read some of their coverage before, and it's characterized as why she was cagey with cops after alleged assault. Just really scared. Feared for the actor's safety. And it's going over the things that we saw, but we do have this added observation here that Jabbari tearfully testified as Majors looked down at the defense table. I wanted to say, help me please. She said that she felt anxious when she found out he was arrested. Okay, so here we have some breakdown on this confusing bathroom floor. Jabbari's description of the aftermath and the assault is starkly different from the picture Majors' defense team painted to jurors earlier this week. And then they go over how Priya Chaudhry said Majors called 911 after finding an injured Jabbari half naked inside a walk-in closet in their Chelsea apartment. Chaudhry says that Majors called authorities because he believed that Jabbari was suicidal. Jabbari, however, said that she was found on her heated bathroom floor, in the jumper that she had put on to sleep. She said that she had fallen asleep after throwing up from exhaustion and pain. Oh, that's why she threw up. I was totally overwhelmed, she said about the moment she woke up to... she could have just said, I threw up from the combination of it all. Like, why try to completely explain away throwing up and not mention any alcohol playing a role in that? Especially, what was that, what we just read from Vicky, that common sense jurors and the bottle of wine on the beach? Well, any juror with common sense will know that if someone was drinking all night, that the reason for them throwing up isn't purely just going to be from exhaustion. The alcohol is going to help facilitate the vomiting. So it's one of these things, like, her words are what's attackable. Like, if she had just said, well, no, I was on the heated bathroom floor wearing a jumper, it doesn't actually have pants. Hey, Michael. It doesn't actually have pants. So, like, I get that people don't understand what a jumper is, but that's why I had no pants, I promise. And then she could have left it at that. Like, she didn't have to volunteer an excuse for throwing up that leaves out the number one reason most people would think that someone that was drinking all night was throwing up. And if it was from exhaustion, why didn't you puke after running 5 blocks? I was totally overwhelmed, she said. And that's where you can see, guys. I I've certainly planted my feet down in a position, and I will question if Jonathan Majors takes a stand and testifies. I'll analyze his words too. It's not like I won't. But I'm just saying I didn't expect to, especially on direct, raise my eyebrows so many times at not just the quotes that we're getting from Grace Jabbari, but how it's being narrated through some of the coverage. Anyway, here we have the safe debate again. I was totally overwhelmed, she said about the moment she woke up to officers in her apartment. The last thing I had in my memory was being alone, which we know that seems to trigger sadness for her, and that she did not want to be alone, but that she was also scared to go to the apartment. But now she's in the apartment feeling safe-ish. She had to lock the doors because she didn't feel safe. And this was so overwhelming. Being a woman, half naked, and surrounded by strange men was not the nicest feeling I've ever experienced in my life. We have the repeat of the opening statements here, the like a football line. We do have it mentioned that the altercation continued when Majors got out of the car to get away from her. But this could have said, the altercation continued when I got out of the car and chased him because I wanted to know who the woman was. So this is that very protective language that we're seeing from some of this journalistic reporting. And there are quotes where Jabbari says, I chased him. It's not like they couldn't have pulled that I language. But this is another, just like that People magazine where the physical altercation just suddenly started somehow out of nowhere. We have here, the altercation continued because of some force, because Majors happened to get out of the car. It didn't continue because Grace Jabbari had any agency or took an action to chase him. This language is so protective. And then they do actually say that she did take a couple of shots and then bought the champagne bottle for the friends. And that she noticed the breakup text around 3 a.m. And then the court saw the text. It's not working out. I don't know what to do. So they saw that text this morning. And then Jabbari responds, the message said, I wish I was kissing you and you went crazy when I asked to see it. I'm not an idiot. Have fun with her. I'm worth more than that. I'm going now. Then while she's at the Chelsea apartment, Jabbari said she spoke with Majors on the phone and that he insisted he did not cheat and that he loved her. When she asked to see the messages, he revealed that he deleted the text thread, so she hung up the phone. I felt like I had been irrational by hanging up and I wanted to continue the conversation. So that's when she started texting and calling Majors for a really long time to speak to him again. When he didn't answer, Jabbari told jurors that she took off her makeup and tried to go to bed. So this whole time you're texting and calling, you still don't realize what happened? Because hold on, we read earlier that, while she's sitting on the bed after she took these 2 pills, just the 2 pills, she's like, what is this? What's happening? What happened? So you remember all this detail and you have all this recall about what you did, when you took off your makeup, and then you get to this point where you wake up 3 hours later in pain, then see your injuries, you feel the dried blood. So you act like you have full clarity for all these moments, and then you just wake up like... So here you say it right here. She woke up 3 hours later in pain. She started to realize the full extent of her injuries. She said she felt the dried blood on her right ear and her right finger that had turned kind of black. And in the bathroom, she took photos of her ear to get a better look. And we know that she texted her friend or something. But we don't see that scrappy text message introduced. So we see 2 text messages introduced that were very early on. This is before she was continuing to call him and try to get him to answer again. But the 2 messages like, it's not working. I don't know what to do. And then Jabbari responded with, I'm not an idiot. Have fun. And that they spoke on the phone and that she hung it up, but that she felt irrational for hanging up. And that happens, right? Like, I don't like to hang up on people. I've probably hung up on people, and I can understand, calling them right back and just being like, my bad. So I get that. But then you call like 32 times and you're not getting an answer, and then you're texting other things, and then we have that last message. There's no note, just wanted to let you know what happened. And let's pause and talk about that, because he got a barrage of messages and missed calls, and he responds with, did you leave the keys? After this message that says, there's no note, just wanted to let you know what happened. But we don't know if did you leave the keys is in direct response to that message. So do you think it's possible that Jabbari really was planning to pack up and move? Or do you think it's possible that, especially since she characterized the phrase, it's all in place, it's all in motion, as being suicidal, if she packaged that way and that was the total context she gave as to why that is supposed to mean he threatened suicide, could it be possible that Jonathan Majors woke up after a breakup and then a barrage of unanswered calls and messages is just over it and just says, did you leave the keys, without even paying attention to anything? then goes through it and realizes from reading it, oh shit, I gotta get back to the apartment. This is crazy. I'm scared she's gonna do something. And then in hearing this theory, because Priya did put it out in the public, Grace had the opportunity to reconcile it and say, that message wasn't me saying I was committing suicide and not leaving a note. That message was me saying I was moving. I was packing my bags and moving, and that when I would be gone, because I had the prospect of being gone, there would be no note for him to know what happened. Because I need to tell him that I'm leaving when he told me this wasn't working and that he was done. I still need to send him 32 calls and messages to tell him I'm leaving. It just seems like maybe looking at those messages, there's an opportunity to go in and say that there's no note wasn't anything scary. It was just about moving. And I'm not sure that I believe that to be the case if she was smiling on the police body cam footage, joking about decorating the penthouse as if she was still going to come back to it. Let me know your thoughts on that, because anything is possible, but I just don't find her that credible. And I feel like this isn't the only instance where she's rationalizing something or looking at something she says or does and coming up with an after the fact reasoning or explanation for it. But just my opinion. Let me know your thoughts. And we'll see if Priya brings this up, but oh my God, I woke up and realized I have these injuries that I didn't notice until I woke up. And the first thing you're saying to your friend is, I got really scrappy with him last night, implying that that's the reason the injury is there that you don't know, that you just realized was there. So, and then here we see her actually describe it herself. So she was taken to a local hospital because authorities thought she had self-harmed. So maybe they're getting ahead of that. Maybe that's true. But we didn't really hear that from anyone except for Priya. She was released, she said, after telling a staffer that her boyfriend had hurt me and that I hadn't done anything to myself. But then we have her admitting here, even after the attack, she said she felt guilty about Major's arrest. She said she texted him to reassure him that I didn't want them to arrest him and that she loved him. Quote, I wanted him to know that I wasn't trying to get him in trouble. But you just said you told him he hurt you, that it wasn't you, that you hadn't done anything. So if you're saying you didn't do anything, that someone else did the thing, what does it mean when 2 minutes later you tell the person that you just said did all the things, oh, I don't want you to get in trouble? And then she says she started to control when talking about the emotional toll the trial and the media attention have had on her life, which she normally kept very private. It's a lot of unwanted attention over a very difficult part of my life. I had to tell friends and family everything, and that has been really hard. It felt like that the abuse I was in has just not ended. So, and then we've got a lunch break. It is now 1 p.m. We've got a lunch break until 2:15 p.m. Okay, so let's get into the afternoon portion of cross-examination by Priya Chaudhry and Grace Jabbari. She's still on the stand. We've got some objections firing off. Let's take a look. So we are back to Josh Russell. It's JRuss_JRuss on X. So 2:30 p.m., cross-examination of Grace Jabbari by Jonathan Majors' defense team resumes after the lunch break. Isn't it true you were screaming at Mr. Majors when you turned the corner at Howard and Lafayette? Majors' lawyer probes Jabbari, trying a bunch of questions to be able to introduce street surveillance video footage showing Majors and Jabbari's fight on the night of March 25th. Chaudhry sustained repeated objections from the judge when she probed Jabbari for details of her immigration status and her cooperation with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. Jonathan Majors' lawyer sustains an objection on a question mentioning the suicide of one of Jabbari's ex-boyfriends, which caused her to choke up and need to leave the witness stand. Gotta go to Moe's. Thanks for subscribing. That's so funny. Welcome to Moe's. Okay, so we hopped over to Pilar for some extra details. She reports that Jabbari is being shown pictures of her injuries, including one where her knuckles appear bruised. Defense lawyers asking her why there are no pics of the dried blood that she testified about this morning. Grace says she cleaned her ear with water before authorities found her inside the apartment. Okay, and so now we have an update from Molly Crane. Grace Jabbari has remained calm under questioning by Jonathan Majors' lawyer Priya Chaudhry. The jury has seen photos of a large cut behind her ear and her fractured finger looking heavily bruised and swollen. Chaudhry just asked whether she screamed during the alleged assault. Were you screaming when you were in excruciating pain? Chaudhry asked. No, Jabbari said. Can you describe what noises you made? Kind of just taking it, Jabbari said. I learned not to fight back. But was there any allegation in her testimony that he's hit her, that he struck her before? And then you said that you testified. Am I crazy? She testified that she hit him. So what does this mean? Kind of just taking it, I learned not to fight back. Where's the testimony that you were in a position previously where he's ever stricken you and you decided not to fight back? And how does you were kind of just taking it? That's distancing language. Kind of. Well, you know you did something else. You know you hit him. You've said during testimony that you hit him. That's why you can't just say you didn't do anything, you just took it. You have to say kind of because you hit him. This is a huge credibility question for me, and I really wish I could see the follow-up from Priya Chaudhry. And then we have Molly also noting Chaudhry has asked about Jabbari's visa status, how she's paying for cabs in the US, and the state of her nails and the photos of her injuries. Judge Gaffey sustained an objection where she asked if Jabbari's teen boyfriend died by suicide, prompting Jabbari to burst into tears. And then we've got one last one here that says, Chaudhry asked if she'd seen videos of her in the club after the incident. I've seen some, yes, the ones you posted, Jabbari said. Gaffey then overruled Chaudhry's objection, giving Major's lawyer a look as if to say she'd made her bed. That one stands, the judge said. Full recap coming shortly. So I'm going to pause there because Dr. Hines, Danny Does Law is going to go live. I will do a recap video to go over any quick bullet points of extra details that come out from day 6. I'm imagining we're stopping in the middle of cross-examination today and it will resume tomorrow. What are your thoughts so far? Let me know. Have a good day. And if you want to hop over to Dr. Hines and Danny Does Law, their live stream, links will be in the description. Take care.